Today's guest used her journalistic skills to uncover her mother's past after she discovered a stash of letters upon her mother's death. In these letters, she found out horrific truths about her mother's experience as a slave during the Second World War.
I was sitting in my office with all of Mama's stuff, all her documents, and I didn't want to go through any of them. And I found this bundle of letters and I went, oh, am I going to get dragged into another one of Mama's dramas? Because my mother and I had a very stressful mother-daughter relationship towards the end. But then, first thing was that I got it translated by a wonderful woman who just did it for me. And she came back and gave me the letters back and gave me the translations. And she said, you know what, when my partner and I read these letters, we cried. There is so much sorrow in them. And I just, And then my friend, was another journalist. And she said, oh my God, Halina, this is a book. You have got to write this story.
Being an artist can be a heck of a ride, but you're not alone. On Journey of the Arts, we tell inspiring stories of artists and chat with those who support us on this path. I'm your host, Lola Opatayo, writer, editor, singer, and all-round lover of words. Come with me on the journey. Hi, and welcome to Journey of the Arts. Today's guest used her journalistic skills to uncover her mother's past after she discovered a stash of letters upon her mother's death. In these letters, she found out horrific truths about her mother's experience as a slave during the Second World War. Today's guest is Halina St James. Halina is a former international TV news journalist whose assignments included Iraq during the First Gulf War, the Romanian Revolution, and 3 Olympic Games. When she retired from journalism, she became a presentation skills coach and professional speaker. You can find out more about Halina at halinastjames.com. Welcome to the show, Halina.
Thank you. I am so very, very happy to be here with you, Lola.
Same here. I'm very, very pleased that I decided to read your book because it was very enlightening. I learned a lot, things that I never knew existed. I think this is such a necessary book. I think sometimes we forget what happened until a courageous writer rises up and says, it's time to write this book. So thank you for sharing your work.
Well, you're very, very welcome. And you're right. It's something that has not really been talked about before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was a pleasure to write it.
Yeah.
Actually, no, wait a minute. Not a pleasure. It took a lot of heart and soul and everything, but I'm glad I did it.
Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine all of the emotional roller coasters that you must have been on. And I'm going to ask you about that as we go further along. But I see all the effort that you put into it, and I salute you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, before we get started, here's a reminder to look up Journey of the Art wherever you get your podcasts. So check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other platforms to listen on the go, follow the show, and leave a comment. This really helps to boost our visibility so more folks like you can discover and join the community. Also, I'd love to connect with you on Instagram, so please follow the show at Journey of the Art Pod. All right, Halina. This is a very sensitive book, and I want us to begin at the point where you discovered your mother's secret stash of letters. She'd passed on, and these letters were all written in Russian, and you had to have them translated. Then you showed them first to your husband and then to your friend, who then urged you to write about them. Can you describe that moment when you finally realized that you were going to write this book?
Oh, the moment when I finally realized that I was going to actually write the book. It was surreal because I had no intention of writing the books. I was sitting in my office with all of Mama's stuff, all her documents, and, totally around me, surrounded me. And I didn't want to go through any of them. And I found this bundle of letters, as you said, And I went, oh, am I going to get dragged into another one of Mama's dramas?
Mm.
Because my mother and I had a very stressful mother daughter relationship towards the end. And I just didn't want to be dragged into it. But then the first thing was that I got it translated by a wonderful woman who just did it for me. And it was 55 letters. It took her a year. So
Wow.
I kind of forgot about them. Okay, this is gone. And she translated them. And she came back and gave me the letters back and gave me the translations. And she said, you know what, when my partner and I read these letters, we cried. There is so much sorrow in them. And I just, I really didn't want to read them. And then my friend, was another journalist. I showed the letters that Marina was the first person that translated them. I showed her what Marina had written, and she said, "Oh my God, Halina, this is a book. You have got to write this story." And then I was starting to get convinced, and I thought, okay, if I'm going to do this, I have to get more translation. Like I
Mm.
didn't get all of the letters translated. So then I got all of them translated. And I told Marina, I said, Marina, I have to find someone who translates professionally.
Right.
I was so grateful for what she had done. And she understood. So I found this translator. Oh my God. Not only, Lola, not only did I find a translator, I found the translator. He worked for the federal government. He had just retired. He was Ukrainian.
Wow.
My mother was born in Ukraine. He was Ukrainian, and he came from the same area that my mother did.
Wow.
So when he looked at the letters, he gave me context. He could do the what the certain idioms of the day meant.
Mm.
He could translate that, and he gave me commentaries like this means, and by the way, they're saying this, but it's actually, and did you know at this time in the history of Ukraine, blah, 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 and was this and was that. And I went, oh my God. And that's when it felt, yes,
Mm.
this is what I'm supposed to do. And it was, by the time I actually started, let's see, I'm just looking at my notes. Mama died in 2018. I got the letters back 2021 from Marina, and then I had them translated. So I actually started in 2022. So what's that? 4 years after my mother died.
Wow.
So I wasn't like, oh my God, I've got to write. It was slow, thoughtful, and I knew when I was started writing, I knew that it was going to take something out of me,
Mm.
and it was going to resolve some things. So I started.
I think it's crucial that you said it was going to take some things out of you and fix some things. Because as I was reading, one of the things that stood out to me was the fact that this must have been such a difficult yet necessary thing for you to do. Because there are several painful incidents in the book. And one of the ones that stood out to me was this moment where your mother left you and your stepfather to be with Walter. And Walter ultimately abandoned her and she returned, but I can only imagine how that affected you as a child. But there are, of course, other incidents like the day that your mother was abducted, the horrors that she survived as a war slave, her difficult life after the war, and the sorrow of your grandparents never setting their eyes on their daughter again. You also discover more painful things when you travel to Germany and you started to do the research to write the book, as you've just shared. Can you talk about the emotional aspect of writing this book? Did you have to work with a therapist while you were writing? Did you have to take months away from your writing just to give yourself time to sort through whatever emotions that this was resurrecting in you? What did that look like?
That's a good question. Once I started, that was it. I started, and I couldn't stop. There were times when I wailed, when I sobbed, when I cried, when I thought I just can't go on. And my husband, God bless him, would come running down to the office, and he would hold me, and I would just cry and cry and cry. Therapy? I'm in therapy now. I'm in therapy now because it really did bring up so much. And I made a pact with myself when I started this book. I was going to be true. I was going to be true to what's going on in my heart, and I'm going to give the readers the truth, no matter how painful it is. And as you described, there were moments. There are a lot of painful moments. Yeah, I wanted that truth, but it cost.
Yeah.
And so I'm still, I'm doing therapy for it, just resolving it all. It's it's more than just a book. For me, it's an exploration, of a mother-daughter relationship.
Yeah.
It's the story of 5 million people like my mother, whose story somehow got lost after World War II. The focus was on the Holocaust, the concentration camps, which were absolutely awful. And my mother did not suffer like the Jews suffered, but she suffered a lot. The camps that the slave workers were in were one tiny step above the camps of the victims of the Holocaust. So it was a story of the slave workers. It's a story, as I said, of mother and daughter relationship. It's a story of intergenerational trauma. It's like you, Lola, are made up of everything that your parents have gone through in their life, and their parents and their parents and their parents. Everything, I'm starting to find out, is intergenerational trauma.
Yeah.
And ultimately, what I really wanted was this book to be about love and forgiveness. I think forgiveness is the greatest thing we can do for each other.
Yeah, I think it's what you said is very so true. About love and forgiveness being the ultimate thing that you wanted to talk about. And I like what you said about intergenerational trauma, because I did see that trauma just cascading down to the generations. But one of the things that I love the most about your book is the structure of it, and how you use the structure of it to drive home that point of love and forgiveness. So it's a 3-part book, and the first part is desire, and then it's deception.
Despair.
Despair. Your
Despair.
grandmother, and then it's deception, your mother, and then it's discovery with you. And I think that it's such a full circle moment, because the book opens with your grandmother and her finding out that her daughter had been taken. It feels like something that happened so long ago, but not too long ago in my home country, several girls were taken away from their schools and taken into the forest. And I don't know if you heard about the Chibok girls.
Yes.
So when I read this, I could connect the dots almost immediately. I don't have any relative who was a victim of that experience, but I could feel a slice of what that pain must have looked like. And that feeling of regrets. Should I have let her go to school? Should I have, what could I have done better? And there really isn't anything that your grandmother could have done better. But then we see that your mother also blamed her for that incident. And carried that resentment, I would say, almost throughout her life. But then you come in with this torch of truth finding. Let's investigate. Let's see what truly happened. Let's stop all the blaming and just unpack the facts. And so you start to, as you find out about the story, you discover your father's side of the family, and there's a lot of reconciliation. So I like that full circle moment that we get to see at the end. This is not a happily ever after book because your father, for instance, never saw you again. You never saw him again. Your mother never saw her parents again. Her parents never saw her again. So this is not a happily ever after book, but I love the honesty in which you told this story, and that sense of the full circle moment, the forgiveness and love that you talked about. And throughout the book, one gets a sense of stark abandonment. Your mother felt abandoned by her parents. Her parents felt abandoned by her when she came to Canada. Your mother abandoned your father and a stepfather at a point, and even you. And you talk about having to go through therapy as a result of the abandonment that you felt for most of your life. And so I'm curious, now that you've been reconnected with your father's side of the family, like I was talking about just now, do you finally feel at home?
I feel happy. And if being at home is that, yeah, I feel at home. I have family. I mean, just like I have family,
Yeah.
I I am an only child. I have no children. So this intergenerational trauma ends with me.
Mm.
That's it. That's my gift to my mother's side of the family. But when I found my family in Poland and they embraced me, no questions asked. They looked at me. There were photographs. They could see I'm a Zabrowska. And I still can't get used to saying, oh, well, I'm going to be launching my book. Oh, my cousin and his partner are coming over, or my cousin Ava said this, or it's so weird coming out of my mouth, but it makes me so happy. I have a tribe. I have a family. I have finally found them. I always felt that I was alone, and this is just a blessing. And not only that, I'm sure you read in the book, like, not only do I have a family, we are part of Polish nobility. Like,
That was so
duh.
cool.
It's like, hello? Seriously? Since the 1600s? And I have on my wall at home here a document signed by Tsar Alexander the second, I think it is, and it's a photocopy, of course. It's with my grandfather's name, Ignacy Zabrowski, in it, saying that his family, since the 1600s up until now, they have the right to be Polish nobility. So I'm not talking like Downton Abbey here or anything. But, you had a piece of land, you had a cow, you were noble,
Yeah.
in Poland. But it was nobility. And we have a coat of arms. And the family is very, very, very proud of it. So that was a revelation. And then the next revelation was on my grandmother's side, my paternal grandmother, Josefa Składowska. She is part of the Składowski family, who are related to Marie Curie Składowska. So Marie Curie, the two-time Nobel Prize winner, that's in the family tree.
Yeah.
And I'm going, you can't make this up.
Yeah.
It's
such a beautiful gift.
It is such a beautiful gift, and I am so grateful. I'm so grateful to have learned of this at my time in life, because I ain't no spring chicken, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that makes this story so touching to me. Is the fact that I don't know if your mother intended for you to take the letters and do anything with them, but you found your family because you took this huge step to tell the story. And you would not have found them had you not taken the step, the bold step to tell the story. And I see an irony in your life versus that of your mother and your stepfather. For the most part, they were keepers of secrets, refusing to reveal pertinent information about themselves, and also refusing to talk about their experiences during the war, as most of the displaced persons that were slaves in that time. But you, on the other hand, have built a career in journalism, a profession that is tasked with uncovering facts and truths. Are you aware of this irony?
I know. It's and they were proud of me that I worked for the CBC, that I was a journalist, that I was traveling around the world, that I was looking for facts and everything. I don't think they ever
Mm.
thought, "Oh, she's going to look into us." So, which leads us to like the letters. Did she? And I don't know the answer to this, Lola. Did she leave the letters for me to find?
I think she did.
I think she did too, because you have to know that they said nothing, nada, niet, niets, about the war years. And all of a sudden, she dies. My stepfather had died before her. And I get these letters. I see these letters. Not only the letters, you can see behind me there are boxes of information. She kept everything. This box in particular is filled with documentation from the camps
Mm.
where she was. And this one is the letters. She kept everything. So I, I kept them all and I went through them. And so they helped me to research the story. But it started with the letters.
Yeah. I mean, one of the questions that, is constantly circulating in my mind is why did she keep them? I mean, she wouldn't have known that you would turn out to be a journalist, but why did she keep them? I still don't know. I still can't explain why she would have done that. Um, but I do think that she left them for you to find. That is my that is my assumption of that. Do you suppose that your grandparents would have been proud of how you turned out as a journalist?
Oh, I think they would have. The book is called The Golden Daughter, and that's because they called her the Golden Daughter. And it was in all the letters, the salutation in all the letters. It was to my golden daughter, to my
Mm.
dear, intelligent, beloved golden daughter, to my one and only golden daughter. know. Uh, when I was born, I became the golden granddaughter, the golden Halinochka. And she would tell them what I was doing. Uh, they unfortunately died before I became a journalist because I was acting, I was working in theater, I was teaching English as a second language at UBC in Vancouver, and by the time I became a journalist, it was in my 30s. They died,
Mm.
so they didn't know. But Mama and Tata is Polish for daddy,
Mm.
so is my stepfather. They were very proud, that this is the way that I turned out. And when I got married the second time, uh, Peter Mansbridge, the anchor from, the national news, walked Mama down the aisle.
Mm.
I thought she was like, you know, I had a celebrity, I had a media wedding, not a celebrity wedding, but a media wedding.
And she
So
liked stuff like that. She liked grandiose things.
oh, she was,
Yeah.
yeah, she always loved, she grew up in a really wonderful big city. And from the letters, I learned that my grandfather was very literate. He could write, and so could my grandmother, and I know nothing about them. So I was going to go and find them in 2022. I was going to go to Ukraine in May of that year and go to Germany as well to follow in her footsteps, because I hadn't, I had been to Germany many times, but not for my own personal stuff. So guess what happened on February the 24th, 2022?
Oh,
Putin invades Ukraine. So I don't want to go into another war zone.
yeah.
Trust me, been there, done that. I didn't want. We couldn't go,
Mm,
and to this day, there is a part of the story that has to be written, and it's sitting in Ukraine.
mm,
It's where my grandparents were buried, and it's where I believe I have family, but I have to find them. And we're talking, Ukraine, even Poland. There's, well, Poland not so much, but Ukraine for sure. They don't have the kind of digital archive systems that we have, in Canada, where you can digitally search something and go online, and they don't have that. So you have to go, and I
mm.
would have to go with a translator, and we would have to search archives. I have an address. That's all, through the letters. So that's God willing. That's the next book. It's going. Look at this.
Yeah.
I'm telling you this because I didn't even know this myself, but I think that'll be the next one.
That would be very interesting to read because I think there's also a lot to find out on their side.
Mm-hmm.
What did life look like for them after your mother got taken? Were there any, I guess, were there any associations that were formed? Association of parents who'd lost their children who didn't return. What efforts, did they make on their part? Because I'm sure that they made a lot of efforts on their part. I think there is a lot to be found, and it would be interesting to see that side of the story as well.
Yes, and my grandfather remarried. My
Oh
mother
yeah,
hit the roof.
yes,
Remember that? He
yes, he did.
remarried.
Yes.
So I have her full name. Maybe she kept the letters that Mama wrote back.
Mm,
I don't have them. So there's a big mystery.
yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? Life is a mystery. We do what we can.
So speaking about your grandmother, about 2 weeks after she passed, you saw a vision. At the foot of your bed, there was a woman wearing a wide brimmed black hat and a long black coat with a fur collar. You'd never seen her before, but when you described your vision, your mother knew that you were describing her mother. And I found this fascinating, considering the fact that you deal with hard facts as a journalist. So, how do you reconcile that moment with the realities that you've encountered in your profession?
You know what? I truly believe there are things that we just don't know. We really, you can't explain it.
Mm,
And I think it's called faith. We have faith in God. We have faith in whatever. You know, I know I saw what I saw. That image was so clear. And then when I looked at the photograph, I thought, yeah, it's my grandmother. And I'll never forget that moment, because that house that we were living in Killarney, Ontario, on an island, it was the first real home we had. Apart from that, we lived in apartments.
mm,
And this was the first home. And there was something about that place, that house. I loved it, and Mama loved it too. But there was a room in that house. It was a little bedroom upstairs next to mine that I never went into. When I did, I'm telling you, Lola, the hairs on my arms stood out. There was something in that room. I kept that door closed, and there was something in that house, but I didn't feel it was evil. And so I spent lots of time there alone. I was 15, 15, 16, 17. And so to me, yeah, even as a journalist, even if I look back at it now, it's conceivable. It really is conceivable that I saw this vision. No, I saw the vision. That's it. That's all.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote it down as I was reading it. I was like, I'm going to ask her about this because, and one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this is this didn't happen when you were a kid. You were, you were 16, about, I calculated around
Yeah.
16. So you were pretty mature, and you wouldn't have conjured stuff up out of the air. But you felt so compelled by it that even now in your 70s, you chose to write about it. So I really wanted to ask you what you believed, and it does seem like you're standing on what you believed.
Yeah, it's just like, there's stuff that happens
Yeah,
and we just don't know why. You meet someone and you all of a sudden you say, wow, I know this person. I really like this person.
yeah,
Why? Or you meet someone and it's just like, oh, I don't ever want to see that person again. It's like,
yeah,
it's our intuition, it's our sixth sense. And it's like we're in a world, that we don't know. There's so much we just don't know. So I always say, okay, prove to me that I didn't see her.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it is just as you've said it. We don't know what we don't know, and there's so
Yeah.
many things that we don't know. So, one of the things that I also identified in this book, and I may have talked about this earlier, is that there was a lot of blame in the book. First, your grandfather blamed your grandmother for your mother's abduction, and then your grandmother blamed herself, and then your mother blamed everyone for the events in her life. And because of this, I would say that there was no closure for a lot of the people in the book, even including your stepfathers. And only you and perhaps your father's side of the family have any closure on the events that occurred. Can you share a bit about what this closure has meant to you? I know you've touched on it a little bit, but I'm wondering if you can share what this closure has meant to you, not just as someone who went through the experience, but you also talked about the fact that this ends with you because you don't have any children of your own. But there are people who are going to read this book 50 years from now and going to know what happened during that time because you've written the story. So I'm just wondering if you could share a bit about that.
That's a really interesting question. It's closure, but it's not closure.
Hmm.
Because we were just talking a few minutes ago that part of the story lies in Ukraine,
Yeah.
but there is closure for my family in Poland, the Zabrowskis, because they did not know what happened to my father. And the family, even though it's large, and my father was one of five or six children. I always have to look at the chart. Uh, even though he was part of a large family, they never forgot him. When I went to Poland, they said, every Christmas we would not be happy because he wasn't there. We didn't know where he was. So having me tell them what happened to him, finding his grave, finding where he was, and then, piecing together that story, that was closure for the family.
Mm.
I think they were really happy with that because they knew, what happened with my father, and he. So the story goes that the family told me was he was a logger in Smith Rock Falls, Northern Ontario, and he loved the outdoor life. He wrote in one of his letters that, he got a chainsaw
Yeah.
and he said, this is a good life for me. And then he logging, I found out because researched this, logging was lucrative. These men worked like crazy. They lived in camps. It was winter. They chopped the trees down or sawed, with their chainsaw, and then they would load them onto a frozen river and then in the spring, the river thawed and it would go down to the sawmills. So they were paid tons of money, and there was nowhere to spend the money. Like the town of Smooth Rock Falls was like 2,000. It has 3 bars.
Wow.
So he was sending stuff overseas, medicine. He sent a bicycle to one of his nephews. He sent dresses to the women, cloth, whatever they needed.
Mm.
And so somebody in the family, I don't know who it was, somebody in the family said, Stanislav, don't send. We have everything. You don't send us anymore because you probably need it. Mm. And apparently, as the story goes, it offended him, so he stopped writing. And Mama had left him with Frank, my stepfather, and I, and then I don't know what happened to him. I don't know how long he stayed logging. All I knew, I picked up the trail and I found him in an unmarked grave in a cemetery in Kirkland Lake. And the cemetery is called, here's the Swastika Cemetery. Like, you can't make this up. So he died and he's in an unmarked grave. And so how did I find him? There's a website. This is the digital age. There's a website. It's called findagrave.com.
Wow.
So I put in the information I had from my documents. I put in his name, where he was born. I knew that. I put in his birthday, date of birth. And boom, a Stanislav Zabrowski pops up in Kirkland Lake, which is a town of 5,000, 2,000. In its heyday, it was 20,000. But how many Stanislav Zabrowskis can there possibly be in Kirkland Lake? Wow. So I knew I had my man. And so then I contacted the cemetery manager, and we went and I went on Facebook again, the digital age. I went on Facebook and I said, does anyone know of a Stanislav Zabrowski who was in Kirkland Lake, died, and and all this stuff? And I get an answer from this woman, Sonia. And when she was a young woman, she nursed my father at the Chateau, which was a nursing home in Kirkland Lake. And so she starts telling me all this stuff and giving me information. And so we had to go up. So after I went to Germany and followed in Mama's footsteps, then I went to Northern Ontario and I found the grave, and it almost killed me.
Yeah,
almost killed me.
That was very moving, that part of the book.
Because it was unmarked. So, the cemetery manager had put, one of those little, like thingy stickers that they put in a supermarket to tell bananas 29 cents or whatever, so he put one of those in, and then he put Zabrowski and he put cellophane around that. Wow. So you can identify it. And I just I cried and I cried and I cried, and the first thing I did was I gave him a stone, a proper burial stone. And then I arranged with the florist to make sure that there are always silk flowers at the gravesite, red and white in the colors of the Canadian flag and the Polish flag. And I just came back from a trip up north, my second time, to his grave. Because when I went to Poland, the family gave me a little bag full of dirt, earth from the family farm in the Anansi. And I had visited the farmhouse that my father was born in, and it's falling apart. Nobody's living there. I took a little bit of plaster and I put that in the bag, and I brought it to Canada. And in June, my husband and I went up to Kirkland Lake, and I went to the grave, and I dug a little hole just on the side, and I poured in the Polish earth, and I put in the plaster from the house, and I said to him, I said, here you go. You're not alone now. Here's a little bit of Poland for you.
Yeah.
We remember you. We will never forget you.
Yeah.
But the other thing, and this is hard to talk about. When I saw his grave with the stone and everything the second time around this past June, I went to it, and without thinking, I put my hand on I knelt down, I put my hand on either side of the stone. And you know what I said, Lola? I couldn't believe it. I just said, why did you never come for me? Why did you never come and look for me? So there's no closure there.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Maybe he thought, maybe he thought I wasn't his. Maybe he thought I was Frank's. Maybe he was so pissed off at Mama. I mean, this is one of the things I'm working on in therapy.
Yeah.
But I was a little girl. I was 4 years old, and I never saw my father again. So why did you never come for me? And that just came out of my mouth.
Yeah.
We don't forget. But then the forgiveness. And I told him, I forgive you. I want to make sure, because I don't know who else is going to come to the grave to see you. Now, my friend Sonia, I connected with her in Kirkland Lake, and she said her parents' grave is close by to my father, so she's going to come and visit him, so he will not be left alone.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm happy with that. That's a bit of closure.
Yeah.
But I don't believe in total closure. We try, but the beat goes on. The story goes on. There's a story in Ukraine that I have to find out about. There is more of a story in my, in Stanislav and what happened.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. There can never really truly be closure. And I mean, your story is one that ends relatively well and I say relatively well because there's still all these loops that have not been closed, but there are so many people whose children never returned home. I was thinking about all the families who never saw their children again, parents who were heartbroken, spouses who were heartbroken, children who were left fatherless or motherless. And so that is the beauty of this book, is that it helps the reader, it introduces the reader to these people who history has tried to forget, and helps us to see that they will never be forgotten because of books like these. They will never be forgotten. And I really want to thank you for taking the time to write this book. There are stories that are similar to yours in my family that for me, it's resurrected the need to ask a bit more questions. And I don't know if I have the courage that you had to write the book, but I want to close this out with a big appreciation for your courage. Because of what you've done, they will not be forgotten.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that very much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Halina.
You're welcome.
On the next episode, I'll be chatting with another inspiring artist. But before then, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me what you think about this show and this episode. Feel free to drop me a note here or send me a DM on Instagram at Journey of the Art Pod. Finally, please subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, or follow and rate the show if you're listening elsewhere. Help me connect with other artists who need a dose of inspiration today. Until next time, stay on the journey of your art.